Hey, greetings everybody. It's your buddy Chapadong. It is Wednesday, April 28th, and we're going to talk a little bit of baseball today. We're going to run through the routine again, just like yesterday, from start to finish, but I'm going to talk about a couple of things along the way that I'm discovering. When it comes to building these lineups, I want you to start thinking of a couple of things as you're building your lineups that might make you a little bit better player. I'll show you how to find the players. I'll show you how to maybe set yourself up for success, but there's a couple of macro concepts that I kind of want to talk about. The first one is total ownership. I believe, I can't prove it yet, but I'm starting to look into, do a little bit of research on total ownership. I believe total ownership matters. Yes, we want to be, if you built around a core of chalky players and took a couple of key pivots, maybe your key pivot is one giant stack, and the rest of your lineup is fairly chalky with a pitcher and then one-offs and whatever else. Maybe your key pivot is the pitcher. But wherever you are, there needs to be a key pivot in there. Let's say you build a very, very, very highly owned, high chalk lineup, and you get a total ownership of 250%. You're probably going to want to be down somewhere in the 200% range overall for that team, because you're going to incorporate a lot of that chalkiness in that foundation of that lineup, but then you're going to be off that chalk in a few key spots. I'm noticing that on DraftKings, the dime times, the 3,500-man dime times, the 1,200-man dime times, a number of around 150 to 200% seems to get the job done more often than not. I looked at the nickel on FanDuel for the first time last night, and on a huge giant slate where ownership shouldn't really matter, it took about 180 to about 210%. Somewhere in there produced winning lineups. Idle lineup myself get to 24th out of 133,000 people. That was great. It got lucky. It was 123% total ownership. I don't think it had much of a chance in the grand scheme of things. It had, Vladimir Guerrero in it, and it got pretty lucky, but it didn't have the rest of a chalky foundation to really give it some winning chances. When I'm looking at smaller slates, that chalk number is going to go up. The chalk concentrates, and it becomes very, very easy to find. And I noticed last night on the late night slate that the percentage of winning lineups, or the total ownership in those lineups, went up to about 230 to about 260%. You might have been able to produce a total ownership lineup last night of 280 to 300% with as much chalk as was out there, but a slight pivot off of that still was about 10 to 20% maybe underneath that biggest number. And I think that we need to start paying attention to that. What I start doing is I start sorting our optimizer at dfsarmy.com by ownership after I've produced my lineups, and I'm trying to pay attention to which lineup, what is the top range? How close to that 200% number is it? And while this is not an end-all be-all, this is just entry-level research, I'm noticing that the lineups that are like 60% total ownership, 80%, they don't have a fighting chance, really. They're a little bit too low owned. Yes, if it works for you, you're going to rock it to the top of the leaderboard, no doubt about it. But the chalk is the chalk for a reason. Generally speaking, that high ownership is obvious. It should produce more often. And when you've got 23 games, or 26 offenses or whatever it was last night to choose from, then you're probably going to want to avoid a lot of the low-owned fluff, the super low-owned fluff, outside of a couple of plays, and mostly absorb the stuff that's going to win. So as I start to formulate that in my own head, I just want you guys thinking about it, because I might start talking about it a little bit inside DFS Army as we start to figure out how we're going to key in on this number and start to determine maybe how important even is it. Because I believe that as you play these contests, stacking and correlating matters. And as we start formulating 3-man and 4-man stacks, and we start winning 100-man, 200, 500, 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 person tournaments, I do believe we go too far. And when we start playing those giant MME contests, those 50,000, 100,000, 150,000, in some cases in basketball, what was it, almost 400,000 people tournaments, stacking no longer becomes the right play to win the very, very, very top. What becomes the right play is the perfect lineup. And stacking gives you a margin for error. It allows you to capture multiple bats within an offense, but it's not very often going to cherry pick the very best play out of 26 different offenses. That requires one-off, 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 one-off. So I think that we get to a spot where in cash games and such, we don't want to stack much because it mitigates risk. But then we get to a point in tournaments and medium-sized tournaments where stacking matters and correlation matters. And then we get to a point in those ultra large lineup contests where the nut lineup wins. We get back to a point where not stacking is more optimal. That's the stuff that I'm starting to pursue. That's the stuff I'm kind of starting to take my head towards and see if I can't come up with something, because I'm noticing unstacked lineups are winning those nickels and those dimes and those giant quarters and whatever an inordinate amount of time for how much stacking should be important to the very foundation of a baseball lineup. I think that people are chasing ISO, and I think that people are hitting correctly with combinations. And last night, the 24th place out of 133,000 people that I pushed through was an unstacked lineup. I think it might add 2 Atlanta Braves in it, and the rest were all one-offs, and they all connected. I think that there's a key there, and I think there's something that we can learn there, and we can use that, how heavy we put weight on correlation. I think that we can start to judge on contest size, where how important that is, or how important it is to start getting back away from it and start going back to one-offs. So let's percolate and let's think on that one over the next few weeks. Let's see where we go with it. I don't even remember what the second thought was, because that one was actually so important that when the next one comes into my head, I'll let you know. What I'm trying to do today, though, is just run a routine. And I'm using the team button here to filter out down to the teams that I have. This one was done by time, but when you come over here to trends, you'll see that I used the teams and X'd out the ones that are not on the slate. So if we go back to the pitchers, what we're looking for is we're looking for KScore. That's just the easiest way to start talking about pitchers. And when I've done this, I don't see a lot of great pitchers today. I see a lot of glass now. This might not be the right Will Smith. I see Alex Wood, Zach Greinke up at the top, but they're not even a 500. So pitching today might be a little bit suspect. That puts a lot of pressure on Glass now to be the lead dog on this sled. And then maybe we can incorporate other portions of some of these other pitchers if we want to get a little bit off that chalk again, because Glass now should be the obvious pick. When I look at the bottom here, if I sort the other way, if I take, like, say, WScore and push that to the bottom, sort by ascending, and that pushes all the bad pitchers, the bad WScore pitchers down to the bottom, we see a lot of high W scores, which tells me, again, that we might have some bad pitchers on the slate. And when I scroll over just a little bit to last year's stats, I can see some pretty awful numbers down in here. So these bottom 4 or 5 teams are probably worth stacking. You can see I'm still searching for Sierra. I'm still looking for key indicators like home run per 9. That's the wrong Will Smith again. High Sierra in Fetty. High Sierra is down here in Oviedo and Dunn. And then some big walk rates, big whips and stuff like that down here at the bottom. So your stacks are going to come Baltimore, Chicago, Washington, Tampa, Atlanta, St. Louis. Toronto's not a bad stack. Philly, Houston, not bad stacks based on those parameters. So again, you want to keep those in the back of your mind. And when you come over here to the hitters, you go back to that W score again. And of course, it's going to double dip on that number because we just sorted by it a second ago. But all of those big bats that come to the top should be out of those offenses. We should start seeing, there's Washington. There's Baltimore. Baltimore's got a lot in it. So Baltimore might be a key stack today based on this number. Okay? So once I've done that and I've written some of these teams down, I start pursuing the deeper dives into those. Who is going to perform? Who is going to be the best? If I wanted to, I can take Baltimore off of here. I can look for who's next. I can take Washington off of here. I can look for who's next. And there's some Atlanta. There's some Chicago White Sox, even more so than Atlanta. So I need to be looking at attacking Casey Mize today. Okay? It might make sense. Now, it might not. But this is telling me that the W scores, that these guys are hitting for high enough WOBAs themselves, and in combination with Casey Mize giving up a high WOBA against, that these guys are in positive matchups. And the beautiful part about doing this is you'll usually find a team or two that the rest of the world is not on. And this can be your low-owned stack that gets you underneath that chalk and gets you down into that 190 to 200 to 210% total ownership range that gives you a fighting chance to be not all that different, but just different enough in one place to make the difference. If it works. Of course, it has to work. Chicago has to come to the party, or else we don't have any chances. But if Chicago shows up and we've got them at lower ownership, bada bing, bada boom, we're in the hunt. And that's what we want. Trends tab. Again, super easy. You've already knocked off by team. You can see the little triangle in the filter there. Now I come over here and I take that 14-day WOBA. And I'm just going to start, need a greater than or a less than. I'm not thinking, trying to do two things at once. But if I go greater than, say, 390, I'm just guessing. I want to see if I get down to about, 20 to 40 players or so. And I take that ISO and greater than about, say, 195. Get real close to those elite numbers of 400 and 200. Because, again, we're looking at a shorter sample size where hot bats can far exceed that elite number. That 400 WOBA and 200 ISO are elite across a season. 162 games. Well, 14 days at most has 14 games in it. So we can run, there are going to be guys that are running really cold. There are going to be guys that run really hot. Over the large sample, which is something we always talk about, the larger sample of 162 games, these hot streaks and cold streaks normalize, and you get what you get. Same way with your DFS lineups and your contests. You guys, everybody gets so pent up on 7 days and 14 days they feel like they're losers when it's just 14 out of 162 games. Just like WOBA, you're going to run hot for a while, you're going to run cold for a while, and you got to let the large 162 normalize everything out. But once we've found this, we come down here. We're pretty close. Pretty close. I might take that WOBA number down just a little bit more. I mean, use WOBA, use ISO, whichever one you want to use. Let's go to 405 and see if that doesn't shorten things up a little. There we go. Now that's maybe a little bit too tight, but at least it's all on one page and you can see. I would actually drop it to 400 and bring a couple more guys in. That said, there's your hot hitters. Now what I've also done, if you really want to line it up in the optimizers, you take these teams and you sort ascending order, you put them in alphabetical order. And now if you do the same in the optimizer and put them in alphabetical order, you go through and then when you see the Arizona bats, you adore Carson Kelly. You see the Atlanta bats, you adore Acuna and Austin Riley. You see you go to Baltimore and you do Freddie Galvis. Was he hot the other day before he got hurt? And he needs to be in the lineup today, of course. But if he is, you've got a hot hitter. If not, nobody else is worth adoring. You just use the projections. Use the projections you're given. But you're giving boosts to Anthony Rizzo and Chris Bryant and Tim Anderson and C.J. Cron and Jordan Alvarez, Yuli Gurriel. You're giving boosts to these guys to pull them even farther forward. And then you let the projections eat the rest of the way from there. You set up your stacks. You like Baltimore, you like Chicago, you like whoever. You set up your pitchers. You like Glasnow, you want to get a little bit substandard and go with somebody else, that's fine too. Pick a spot to get a little substandard, chalk up kind of the rest, use the projections for most of what you do, and throw those 4-man stacks out there. Now, if you're in the nickels, here's what you might do. You might take that stacking section, and 4x2, 4x3, 4x X, 4x4, whatever, if you're playing on FanDuel. And let's say I want 50% 4x3s because that wins the most often. And I want 10% 4x2s. And I want, 10% 4x4s. And I want, 25% 4x-X's. And you've got it where it adds up to 100%. Everything's going to be at least 4 stacked. It's great. But in the nickels, there are chances that unstacked lineups are winning. I might take 20 to 25% of that. It's a big chunk. And I might just leave it wide open. I might, instead of adding to 100%, I might add to 75 to 80% with my 4x3, 4x2, 4x-X type stacks and leave 10, 20, 25% of it unstacked and just let the lineups go. Now that you've pulled these hotter hitters and these high ISO hitters forward, you might just get the right combination of all of those hot bats, all of those smashers that have a good day. And if they all have a good day together, your one-off lineups will outperform any stack because your stack, 4 guys in a offense don't very often all produce winning lineups, winning stats. Usually 1 or 2 are parlayed off with runs and RBIs, and he hits value because of everyone around him, but he's not a nut performer himself. And so you can search out and find all those nut performers on occasion by leaving a portion of your lineups unstacked. That is something that I'm willing to talk about more, something I'm willing to do more research on, along with total ownership, along with these things. And this type of stuff is what we talk about at DFS Army all the time. So now that you've seen this system front to back and see how simple it is, I'm not diving too deep. You come inside, we talk a little bit more deeper strategy inside the MLB channels at dfsarmy.com. You use the coupon code CHOP, CHOP, for a 10% discount to get there. You get inside and you use these tools and you become a better player. Period. End of story. Wednesday the 28th. Peace out, home slices. Talk to you soon.